In this video tutorial, I'm going to teach you how to use Internet of Things. Internet of Things allows you to create a digital signage smart business and automate the interaction between your digital signage presentation and the physical world. In other words, you can, for example, turn on a light when a user clicks a part of the presentation, or send events to the signage presentation in case of an emergency like a fire. Of course, the possibilities are endless, so it's our goal here to explain to you how to take advantage of Internet of Things with media signage so you can create something amazing for your business. So how does it all work? Through the Signage Studio, you'll configure any one of your regular signage players to act as a socket gateway. This means that your signage player, in addition to running a regular presentation, will also be able to communicate with your IoT hub. It will be able to send events, post commands, as well as receive post commands from your IoT hub. Now you can use any IoT hub that supports post commands. This includes Vera, Arduino, Ninja Blocks, or many of the IoT devices out there that you can just purchase on the market. And your IoT hub can connect to any smart thing: plugs, switches, relays, cash registers, elevators, anything you want. And your IoT hub will send post commands to the signage player. And as well, if you wanted to, for example, touch the screen and turn on a light, the same thing will happen. The signage player will simply send an event to the IoT hub, and the IoT hub will connect to any smart device. So it's all pretty straightforward to set up. It's really not that complicated. So let's begin. So in this tutorial, we're going to talk about ArduinoYun. Arduino is an amazing prototyping platform that allows you to build any custom circuitry using any type of sensors, relays, switches, and then you can incorporate whatever you built into your digital signage presentation. So for example, if you wanted to have a fire alarm kick off during an emergency, you could do that, and we'll show you how to configure that. As well as if you wanted to, for example, build something where if a customer walks into a store or if a customer picks up an object, you could change the presentation accordingly. So you could play timeline that's related to that particular product. Once the product is put back, again, you can change to the default timeline. And as you can see here, you can purchase hundreds of different sensors for Arduino, so you can literally build any custom solution you want using lasers or pretty much anything that comes to mind. And you don't have to be an electric engineer to be able to figure this out. There's a lot of really good material out there on the web, so building something custom with ArduinoYun is really not that complicated. Now, one of the great things about ArduinoYun is that it actually has Linux running directly on the board. This means that on this board right here, you have Linux that communicates with a microcontroller. So you can connect to these pins right here any type of sensor you want, and the Linux therefore can talk to the microcontroller. The Linux OS also will speak to the signage player using a post command, and the signage player will also be able to send post commands directly to the Linux. So this means that the ArduinoYun is essentially a node, and the signage player is our gateway. So this is our circuitry up close. We basically have our reed switch right here. We have our speaker, little buzzer right here. We have a carbon detector right here, as well as a smoke detector. We have a flame detector over here on top. We have an LED that can be turned on. This is ArduinoYun with the Linux as well as the microcontroller. It has both Wi-Fi and Ethernet, so I'm using the Wi-Fi to communicate back to our signage player, which is again the gateway using post commands. So to demonstrate this, I've built a small custom circuit using ArduinoYun, using just a breadboard. And you can see that it's running a presentation. However, as soon as I simulate a fire using basically just a flame, you'll see that the presentation changes to fire, and I've set it for a few seconds before it goes back. So now it goes back to our regular timeline. Again, simulating fire using a flame detector, and you can see that it goes back into the regular presentation. I also configured an override. So if you wanted to have somebody manually trigger the system, again, the LED turns on. Again, simulating just a manual override. So this circuitry took about an hour to build, very simple. And then as you can see, this was integrated into our signage presentation. The other thing I built is a reed switch, which essentially is just a magnetic detector. So there's a magnet inside the little prop, and you see when the prop gets picked up, our presentation changes to the iguana. So this is kind of like a museum where if a person goes and checks out a particular product, picks it up, it plays the presentation on that product, and then once it gets put back, you can see the presentation goes back to normal playback. Now, in order to be able to send and receive post commands from the Signage player, you need to configure the Signage player as a LAN server, and that does require that you have an enterprise account. Go ahead and log into your Enterprise Studio and make sure you enable the different checkboxes, and you can see right here the LAN server. So I went ahead and logged into my regular account, and you can see I have my museum campaign. Select the campaign to go to its properties and go to events, and you can see that I just set 3 events. One is called fire, that will switch into my emergency timeline. I have the iguana that will switch into my iguana timeline, and I got just event 1, which will go back to the default timeline. So very simple, just 3 events that are set up at the level of the campaign. When we catch these string events coming from the post command, we'll switch to the appropriate timelines. Now you can see that there's more options over here. If I select a timeline, I can also resume presentation, and I can also post URL. With the post URL, what I can do is actually send a command, send a post command back to the Arduino. So if I wanted the Arduino, for example, to turn the light on or do something, whenever something is clicked within the presentation, I can send a post URL to the Arduino. But in our case, we're just selecting a timeline. To learn more about the post URL, make sure you check out the Internet of Things, the video tutorial on Vera, where we actually cover the post URL. So next, let's go ahead and switch over to stations to configure the actual player as a LAN server. Select my station. Make sure that I enable the LAN server right over here. Go ahead and grab its IP address. So this is my local IP address of my server, and I have port 999, and that's really all I have to do as far as the Signage Studio. Just set the IP address of the server, the port, and to capture the event strings. Go ahead and save my configuration. So I'd like to turn your attention really quick to the code that I'm running on top of the Linux inside Arduino. So I'm loading the Fermata driver. This driver is essentially the bridge between the Arduino microcontroller and the Linux. So you can download this driver for whatever programming language you like, if you're using Python or PHP or Perl. In my case, I'm using Node.js over Google's V8 engine that runs on the Arduino. And over here, I'm basically connecting to this bridge between the two. And all pretty simple code, nothing really too fancy. What I'd like to show you though is over here that I show the digital read. Basically, if the magnet is picked up, I send a post command using curl directly to the IP address of my Signage player using the port just as I showed you earlier, and the IP address of my player, my Signage player. And most importantly, I'm sending the event iguana, so the timeline will switch to the iguana timeline when the magnet is detached, and anytime the iguana is placed back, we'll get an event of 0, and we send event EV1, event 1 to go back to our regular playback timeline. So really simple stuff. Again, if I scroll down, you'll see the same behavior right here. In case there's an emergency, switch to the fire timeline and go back to event 1 if there's no fire, and I just set the timeout. So I hope you enjoyed this video tutorial, and thanks for watching.